Hi, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mateo Chavez Lewis, and welcome back to the channel.
Music Theater Theory, oh.
I've been away from the channel for the last little while. I've been growing out my hair, because I'm going to play Jerry Lee Lewis in $1 Million Quartet at the Arts Club this summer. So I've been prepping for that and everything. My partner got into grad school in New York, and so we are planning, fingers crossed it all works out, a move to New York City in the fall, which is very exciting. I recently visited New York to check out some neighborhoods, see where we might want to live, and also, of course, to see a bunch of Broadway shows. So that is what I have in my hand here. This is my army of playbills from all of the shows that I saw in the week and a half that I spent in New York last month. And so I'm just going to kind of go through each one and give my, very brief review on each one. No, I'm not pretending to be a critic here. That's not what I do. I very much approach this as a person who practices theater, as someone who writes theater, and as someone who performs in theater, and mostly talking about what I loved and what I've learned about my own artistic practice from each piece that I saw. So that's what it's going to be. If you want a real critical review, go watch it. There's plenty of theater critics with YouTube channels as well. Mickey Joe Theater is a great one. I'll link his channel in the description. But these are just some of my thoughts as a writer and as a performer. So the first thing I saw was this little play called Leopoldstadt by Tom Stoppard. This was an absolute gut punch. It's 2 hours long, no intermission, and it's about a family, a Jewish family living in Austria in the late 1800s into the mid 1950s. And so we see this family go through a couple of generations of history, and obviously we see the way that the Second World War impacts them. At first, I wasn't really sure what the plot was because it's told in these snippets of moments of history. I had a hard time understanding what the through line was that was connecting them, other than the fact that the characters were all related to each other. But about halfway through, they have this discussion about the game Cat's Cradle, and that's what's pictured on the playbill here, is a kid playing this game with string, which is called Cat's Cradle. If you don't know the game, I feel like most people have heard of it. And one of the characters says something to the effect of, every state that you can put the string in leads to another state. And it seems kind of chaotic at first, but our job as mathematicians is to examine the before state and the after state and try to understand how we got from point A to point B. And of course, he's talking about the game, but in a way he's also talking about history and how important it is for us to learn our history. I think that was kind of the central message that I took away from the show. And you can kind of tell whenever you have in a play anything action-wise that thematically that keeps coming back. Like at the very beginning of the play, the first thing we see is a girl playing Cat's Cradle. So that tells me as the audience member, okay, this is going to be really important to pay attention to. There's something about this game of Cat's Cradle that is essential to what this show is all about. And so then when they start talking about Cat's Cradle, everything they say about Cat's Cradle is also a metaphor for what the theme of the show itself is. And that's something important to remember as a playwright as well. If you have something that keeps coming back like that, some motif like a string game or anything, really good playwrights will make sure that those motifs have a thematic meaning to them. So I just thought it was brilliantly constructed and communicated its message really well. And I mean, the emotional punch of the show is just jaw-dropping. It's astounding, and there's absolutely nothing I can say about that. Go see it if you can. It's still running on Broadway, and I think it's a very heavy contender for Best Play this year at the Tonys. Next up, we have this little musical called White Girl in Danger, kind of the follow-up to A Strange Loop by writer Michael R. Jackson. And I was very fortunate to get to see opening night of this production off Broadway. I love things that are just super weird and wacky, but again, for a thematic reason. This show makes no sense in a lot of traditional senses of the word. I mean, all sorts of wacky stuff happens, like she becomes president of the United States randomly. It's never really explained how that happened. People just die and then come back to life as ghosts, and there's kind of no internal logic whatsoever to the crazy, outlandish, supernatural things that happen in the plot. But the idea is that they're all in a soap opera. Then at the end, spoiler alert, we get to meet the writer. It's like a very scathingly, bravely self-critical piece of work about racial dynamics and about the psychology of upper class black people. And at one point, the main girl, Keisha, her mother says to her, "I'm so proud of you and I admire you more than you will ever know," or something to that extent. And that felt so much bigger than just the relationship between the daughter and the mother. It felt like a major statement about generations of oppressed people. I mean, I definitely identified with that as a queer person. I talked to my queer elders and they have always been so impressed and proud of the work that we've done to dismantle a lot of the oppressions that they've gone through, and there are a lot of things that they had to suffer through that I will never have to suffer through, because we have made a lot of progress as a society. And I think it's very inspirational for them to see that. And then even when I look at people 10 years younger than me who are just going into high school now, for example, queerness is so normalized, and being non-binary is so normalized, being bisexual is so normalized, in a way that just 10 years ago it wasn't. So I kind of feel that same thing of I'm so proud of the generation after me, and I'm so glad that they are continuing to kind of dismantle these oppressions of queer people. That was how I related to it. I obviously don't know the black experience. I have not lived the black experience, obviously. But I sense, and feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I sense that that is something that applies to many, many marginalized communities. And I thought it was really beautiful and powerful. So yeah, White Girl in Danger, it's wacky, it's insane, super high energy. I don't know how the performers do it. It's incredibly, incredibly demanding. It's a freaking marathon of a show. Special shout outs to LaToya Edwards, James Jackson Jr., and Tara Connor Jones for just beyond out of this world performances, all three of them. Just unbelievable stage presence, a nuanced kind of understanding of the absurdist tone of the show. It was just beyond brilliant from all three of them. And from the whole cast, they all did an incredible job. It got relatively encouraging reviews too, so we will likely, fingers crossed, be seeing a Broadway transfer in the next season. I certainly hope so. I think this show deserves to be seen by more people. It's really interesting and it's going to be polarizing, but I really thought it was cool. The next thing I saw was Sweeney Todd. Now listen, Josh Groban is one of the best singers in generations, and to hear him sing live was such a privilege. And he's not a bad actor either. I don't know that I buy him killing anybody. He's just so sweet. He's got these big watery eyes. He's a little bean, but he sounded beautiful. Annalay Ashford is an absolute comedic genius. Some people have commented that she's cast a little bit young for Mrs. Lovett. You know, it's interesting. Both Josh and Annalay are in their late 30s right now, which makes sense that would be the age that the characters actually would be. If Benjamin Barker has been gone for 15 years, then, you know, he was probably in his early 20s when he left, because that was the age that people were married and had kids by. So I think it makes sense that the characters are actually that age, and I think they're usually cast a little bit too old. Annalay also has such a youthful vibe about her. Like, she could play 20s easily on stage, and I actually think that really worked for Mrs. Lovett personally. Yeah, it's true. Most Mrs. Lovetts are usually cast older and seem kind of wizened and world-weary in a way. But this Mrs. Lovett was very sprightly and childlike almost, and I really liked that for the character. It made me really believe, she wouldn't consider the consequences of her actions at any point. And I really liked the dimension that added to the character. Also, Gaten Matarazzo from Stranger Things is like the great musical theater performer of our generation. He's so good. His voice is really solid, and more so than that, he is just such a controlled, focused, and powerful actor. It is extraordinary to watch him. I saw him as Jared in Dear Evan Hansen too, and both times just the subtlety and the specificity of his performances. He did no more than what was absolutely necessary to tell the story, and then every so often he would just hit you with something totally unexpected and really powerful and profound and truthful. He's one to watch. Oftentimes, when these TV stars are cast in musicals, they're like not really fit for the stage and not really fit for musical theater, and they're cast to sell tickets, but Gaydon is sincerely amazing. Cannot wait to see him on Broadway more. Also, what a treat to hear this conducted by Alex Lacamoire, who famously did the orchestrations for Hamilton as well as Dear Evan Hansen, and the music just comes to life. It is this wall of sound in the opening number and the finale and everything. These sopranos screeching Sweeney at you at the top of their lungs. It is just absolutely phenomenal. Definitely worth going to see this production, and it's definitely a contender for Best Revival at the Tony Awards this year. Next up, we have Anthony Rapp's solo show, Without You. Here I have my little signed copy that I got. There's Anthony's signature. He was giving these away for a small donation to Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS, which of course is an amazing charity, and if you are able to donate, please do. This show was just beautiful. It was criminally undersold in this little off-Broadway house. There were a lot of empty seats, and I was really surprised to see that because Anthony Rapp, obviously, of Rent fame, is very well celebrated in the musical theater world and in the musical theater fandom world. So I'm surprised this show hasn't been getting more publicity and hasn't been selling more. Also, the tickets were really affordable compared to most New York theater. It's 90 minutes. He doesn't leave the stage. It's this beautiful journey that he takes you on using songs that he's written with some collaborators and songs from Rent. He speaks about losing Jonathan Larson, who wrote Rent and obviously was a very good friend to the people who developed the show, Anthony included. The world lost Jonathan way too soon from a misdiagnosed aortic aneurysm. And so he speaks about his experience losing Jonathan and then very soon afterwards losing his mother to cancer. And grappling with grief and using his art and his music as a way to work through his grief and to keep the people he loved, who he's lost, alive. I thought it was really beautiful and a stunning performance from him. The amount of stamina he has. Still, 25, however many years after Rent, he still has this vocal power to his voice. It was really, really worth seeing. Can't recommend it enough. Without You, Anthony Rapp. Playing, I believe, until June, middle of June, at New World Stages in New York. Go check it out. Tickets are super affordable, and it is well worth the cost. Next up was Camelot. Now, I was very much looking forward to this. It has a revised book by Aaron Sorkin, who I absolutely love. I think West Wing is positively brilliant. Aaron Sorkin's dialogue is genius. I kind of think of him as like the Sondheim of screenwriting in that he packs so much detail and complexity into his work. I have to say this was a bit of a letdown for me in some ways. I really appreciated Aaron Sorkin's contributions. I thought his book was very snappy and funny. I mean, as an Aaron Sorkin play or an Aaron Sorkin script always is. Interestingly, Philippa Sue is a person who... Philippa Sue played Guinevere. You may know her as Eliza in Hamilton. When she belts, it is so brilliant. It's this tiny little focused sound that just... It's electric. It shoots out of her face. Instead of spreading her vowels really wide and going for a sound like ah, and going for a sound like ah, she really focuses the sound ah, but it gives it this piercing quality that's really stunning to hear live. But it's interesting when as soon as she flips into like a classical head voice, it's a lovely sound, but it's very, very quiet. And I just personally, my personal taste, I wanted a little bit more power behind it. Like, an example is in The Simple Joys of Maidenhood, we got a little bit of like, where are the simple joys of maidenhood? Pretty. But I kind of wanted a little bit more like, where are the simple joys of maidenhood? Like a little bit more classical soprano. But of course, she acted the role very, very well. The highlight of this show, the sword fighting is one highlight of the show. We see the sword fights live on stage. The fight choreography is amazing. Shout out to fight director B.H. Barry. Just really well done. But the other highlight of the show was Jordan Donica as Lancelot. What a voice! He's a reincarnation of Robert Goulet. It's beautiful. Hearing him sing, "If ever I would leave you," in that deep, deep baritone, that was like worth the price of admission on its own. Next up, we have Kimberly Akimbo. This is just a beautiful, beautiful show. It depicts this girl who is 16, but has a rare disease that causes her to age very quickly. And so at age 16, she looks like she's in her 70s. She is played by Victoria Clark, an absolute legend of musical theater. And what a joyous, hopeful, heartbreaking performance Victoria Clark gives in this show. It is beautiful. Definitely a front runner for Best Actress for the Tonys, I think. And so the whole show is kind of about this dynamic between Kimberly, who has this disease that causes her life expectancy to be 16, and she's turning 16. And then all of the people around her who are just sweating the small stuff in life, you know? The kids in her high school who are so worried about who has a crush on who and what did I get on the big test. Her dad, who's an alcoholic and always says he's gonna figure himself out, but later, not tonight. Her Aunt Deborah, who comes into her life through a window. That's kind of a weird plot point. She is stealing checks from a bank and washing them, and it's a whole weird thing. And at the center of it all is this girl who doesn't have the luxury of waiting till tomorrow to be a better person and live a better life. And that dynamic is really, really fascinating to watch. Kimberly meets this kid in her class, Seth, who's played by Justin Cooley. And Justin Cooley just gives one of the most likable, amazing performances on Broadway right now. He is so charming and so sincere and so sweet. The relationship between him and Kimberly is so believable as a really cute friendship and maybe more ship between two teenagers. And it's played so believably and it's written so beautifully and charmingly. And it's performed on stage by Victoria Clark, who's this older actress, this very experienced actress, and then Justin Cooley, who's in his early 20s, fresh out of university, making his Broadway debut. And the fact that they have such good chemistry together, and you fully believe they're the same age. It's really, really magnificent, and that relationship between those two characters is kind of the best part of the show for me. Also, Ali Mazi is brilliant. She plays the mother. She's got both her hands in casts the whole time. So it's like Evan Hansen, but times 2. She's just absolutely hilarious in the role. She's brilliant. And then she sings this really soft, simple, heartbreaking lullaby called Father Time, which is kind of, in a weird way, the thematic heart of the show, I think. That song. I mean, the cast recording's out. Go listen to it. It's brilliant. Maybe I'll do an analysis on the channel at some point, but it's beautiful. And now Ali Mazi is a vocal superpower. She can skrelt to the heavens. She can sing super high coloratura soprano to the heavens. But in this show, instead of really using her whole voice, she's very, very pared down in a way that I found quite beautiful, and it forces you to lean in, and she does it so well. She navigates these soft, subtle little vocal lines very, very well. So Ali Mazi was another highlight of the show for me. And then, of course, Bonnie Milligan has the voice of a frickin' nuclear bomb. I can't explain. Just unbelievable to hear her sing live. Kimberly Akimbo, definitely a front runner for Best Musical at the Tonys this year. Check it out. It's brilliant. And then, of course, last but not least, I saw Parade. It is so dark and so brutal to watch. I went with my partner and we just held each other crying the whole time, basically. But it is so, so beautiful. Ben Platt is solid as Leo Frank. I mean, Ben Platt is one of my idols. I really love his voice. I love everything he's ever done. I feel vocally a little bit underused in this one. Leo Frank was written for Brent Carver, a Canadian actor who very sadly left us a few years ago. And it was a baritone role, the big high note that Leo Frank sings in All the Wasted Time. It's his only big chance to fully let loose vocally. And it's an F, right? And you've got You got Ben Platt who can sing F, G, A, B flat, like who can sing, you know, a fifth above that. There will be a full analysis of a parade song coming to the channel soon, almost certainly. So I'll talk more about that when that comes out. It just felt kind of strange to have Ben Platt sing this note that was supposed to be this really big, powerful note. It just didn't feel the same as hearing Ben Platt sing to his fullest capacity. And this was different than Ali Mazzi in the sense that Ali's track in Kimberly is kind of intentionally, it feels like, a little bit pared down and subtle and forces the audience to lean in. Like Father Time is written very, very soft and minimalist. But Parade, it feels like there are sections where it's written fortissimo and is supposed to be a baritone belting his face off at that high F. But for Ben Platt, who's like a very high tenor, it doesn't have the same effect that I think it was written with the intention of having. Also, I don't know, Jason Robert Brown, if you ever watch this, I have a question. In the opening number, Old Red Hills of Home, there's an opt-up that Charlie Webb does. The melody goes, "These old red hills of home." But Charlie Webb goes, "These old red hills of home," up to the G, on the word of. And now, Jason, I've seen many interviews where you talk about setting music to words. And by opting up on the word of, it kind of feels like the word of is being emphasized. When I don't really understand why that word in that particular sentence is being emphasized. Jason, if you're watching, I would love to hear your thoughts on why that choice was made. Anyways, that's just a bit about like my little nitpicky vocal moments. But other than that, everything was amazing in this show. Michaela Diamond, like, holy crap. How reserved, controlled, she's just vibrating with energy in this show. She's brilliant. Her voice is stunning, and she really fully disappears into the role. It's absolutely incredible to watch, maybe even winning a Tony for this role. She was just so good. The surprise standout star of the show for me was actually Jake Peterson, who plays Frankie Epps. And he has this song that's one of my favorite Jason Robert Brown numbers because, if you don't know, the plot of Parade is that it's about a girl who gets murdered in Georgia in the early 1900s, and Leo Frank, a Jewish man from New York, gets framed for her murder because of anti-Semitism. And he ends up, spoiler alert, getting lynched. Based on a true story. This actually happened. And Jake Peterson plays Frankie Epps, who is a boy about the same age as the girl who gets killed. He's a friend of hers, and he sings this song at her funeral called "It Don't Make Sense," which is such a great song. It starts off as like a eulogy or a remembrance of Mary, the girl who passed away. It starts off, "Did you ever hear her laugh? When she laughed, you swore you'd never cry again." It starts off like that. But then slowly, this like minor chord comes in. I might do an analysis of this song on the channel too, because I just love it so much. These minor chords come in, and suddenly it turns into this like murderous anthem of like, whoever did this, I'm gonna fucking kill them. And Jake Peterson, who plays the role in this revival, does such a good job of navigating that. It starts out so casual. It's not melodramatic. It's not over the top. It's not, oh my God, my friend is gone. It's just like, yeah, man, like when she laughed, you swore you'd never cry again. Like, that's just how it is. Which, something about that is almost more emotional to me. And then, like, just that subtle change of going from, like, man, I really miss her and this really sucks, to whoever did this, I'm gonna kill them. They're gonna die. They're gonna taste the fires of hell. Like, that journey was so subtle to the point where when we got there, we didn't even realize how we got there. And we were like, oh my God. And I mean, this also is like a big thematic moment in the show, is that they're all so dead set on revenge that they need to find a scapegoat. And they pick Leo Frank because of anti-Semitism that is prevalent in that community at that time, which is unfortunately very relevant today. I think that song is very important to show the way that the community gets from mourning this lost girl to taking its anger out and its revenge out on an innocent person. And Jake Peterson did it really, really well. Also, I love this minimalistic direction that we get from director Michael Arden, who is also a performer and a writer. He's just a complete polymath, multi-hyphenate genius. And I really love the direction here. We get, this very minimalistic set with a stage in the middle that makes it feel like everything is kind of happening in the public eye. And Ben Platt actually sits on stage in a little cell on the stage throughout the entirety of intermission, which is a really cool, almost like a live art installation moment of just watching this man kind of slowly go crazy over the course of intermission, which I think is a brilliant choice. It's very innovative. This is also definitely a contender for Best Revival. It broke my heart. I cried the whole time. It's so great. It's so great. Go see it. And that is almost all of the shows that I saw in New York. I did also see a little show called Funny Girl, starring Lea Michele. So I'm actually going to give that show and Lea Michele's performance in it its own video. I released a video last summer when it was announced that she would be playing Fanny Brice on Broadway, where I analyzed her performance of Don't Rain on My Parade from Glee. And then I released a video a few months after that when she actually took over the role of her performance as Fanny on a morning talk show, analyzing that performance and kind of comparing, contrasting, seeing what the differences are. And so I'm going to give it a whole review video of actually seeing her in the role. So when that comes out, I will link it right over here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!